everybody and welcome to this video. I've had lots of people saying, oh, I can't wait to hear how you got on at Walt Disney World or what you thought about what it's like at Disney at the moment. So I thought I'd do a really quick overview video just of the experience that I had, just so that people can understand what's different, what's not, what you need to think about when you're going, if you're going to go anytime soon. The first thing I'm going to talk about is flights. I've done a video about the processes, testing, paperwork and all of that you need to bear in mind before you fly. In terms of getting to the actual airport, I'd heard you need to get there at least 3 hours before, because there could be 2 to 3 hour waits for check-in. So I got there 4 hours before, and there was two parties in front of me. Now, because I'd done the Fly Ready, Trust Assured, Virgin document check thing in advance, I got to join the Fly Ready line. There was probably 200 people in the economy check-in line for people who hadn't done that documentation Fly Ready process, which I was quite shocked about actually, because I thought it was common knowledge that it was better to do that. But it took me, I think, a grand total of 14 minutes from joining the line to heading up to departures. I wasn't asked anything about any of my COVID documentation. She just asked whether I had a visa or an ESTA, and that was it. I was away. Security took no longer than normal. It was exactly the same process. The plane was probably not quite 2/3 full on the way out, and I had the 2 seats to myself. So from a comfort point of view, that was fantastic. I wasn't disturbed by anybody, nobody putting their seat backwards and forwards, nobody bashing the seat behind me. I had a seat to put my feet up on, and from a COVID point of view, I didn't have anyone around me. I wore an N95 mask on the plane. I changed my mask, I think, 3 times, because they advise you to change it every 4 hours, so I did. And on the way out, most people, I say all people, everyone was compliant with the regulations. It is a requirement to enter the US, so I guess everybody has that pressure on them that if they want to get in, so they're going to wear their mask. It was a long flight because it's a smaller aircraft, and we had a headwind, so it was 10 hours and 10 minutes, which is almost as long as it took to get to Hong Kong. It was crazy. Immigration, walked straight through. I maybe stood on the line and waited for 30 seconds. We just walked through the line, got called down to the point, the guy waved me forward, he did my passport, and then I was through waiting for bag drop. My bag, I had enough time from getting through immigration. I went to the toilet, I came back, and by the time I came back, the bell had started up. So maybe 10, 15 minutes, and I had my bag, and I was off. So the whole experience from landing to being in the main airport terminal was probably half an hour, 45 minutes. In terms of car hire, I didn't find any difference with the car hire process at all. I had some issues. They had 3 cars, all of them had engine warning lights. That's not a COVID thing, that's not unusual. I've had that happen before. That's a personal choice. I just don't want to take the risk of taking a car that has an engine warning light on it. I would rather wait the extra half an hour that it took them to find me a decent car, so that I know that I'm not going to have any problems, have to ring them up, insurance issues or whatever is going to happen. So there was no difference with the car hire. The hotel, again, the only differences with the hotel were related to the fact that the hotel has changed ownership since I last stayed there. And they were very minor differences in terms of the check-in process. So COVID hasn't actually affected the hotel process at all, other than the fact that, again, I would say the hotel was maybe 1/3 full. The car park was only ever 1/3 full at night, and when I've stayed there, it's quite difficult to find a space if you come back after park close, so it was definitely fewer people in the hotel, but other than that, exactly the same experience. Housekeeping came in every day, they hoovered, they changed the sheets and they changed the towels, wiped down the sink area in the bathroom every day, so normal service from that point of view. Now we get onto the parks. The general feeling in the parks is exactly the same, as far as I'm concerned. I didn't really think, oh, this is different because of COVID, this is different to when I was last here. The differences for me were it was packed. It was so busy. The 2 weeks that I went would normally be low season, maybe a 2 or a 3 out of 10 on the crowd register. I would say Hollywood Studios was at least a 9. Epcot and Magic Kingdom were an 8 or a 9, and Animal Kingdom probably 6 or a 7 or an 8 on the busier day that I was there. Hollywood Studios was worse than Magic Kingdom at Christmas. It was absolutely horrible. I didn't enjoy my day at Hollywood Studios at all, just because of the amount of people. Regardless of COVID or anything, I wouldn't ever choose to go to Disney when it's that busy. Not that I regret going, and not that I wouldn't do it all again. If I had a time machine, I would still go back and do it, knowing what I know now. But I wasn't expecting it, and it was absolutely rammed. So I think you just need to be prepared that the crowd levels are going to be nothing like they used to be, and you can't base crowd levels on historic patterns, because at the moment everybody is just, they're calling it revenge booking, I think. Everyone's just like, I haven't been for 2 years, I have to go, bam, and booking, which is exactly what I did, so I can't complain. Most of the attractions were open, apart from stuff that was closed for annual seasonal refurbishment, like Splash Mountain in the first week, Big Thunder Mountain in the second week, Expedition Everest. Space Mountain went down quite a few times. Tower of Terror, Rock and Roller Coaster and Slinky Dog were all down at the same time one morning at Hollywood Studios. But I don't think that's unusual for a 9-day stay to have periods when rides have gone down. You got a lightning lane, you get an anytime one when the ride is shut, just like you do with Fast Pass, so nothing there was any different. Shops were different. Quite a few shops are shut, and it's pretty much the same merchandise in every shop. Before, you used to go into the Winnie the Pooh ride gift shop and it would be lots of Winnie the Pooh stuff. You would go into, I can't think of any shops now. You'd go into one somewhere in Fantasyland and you'd have Fantasyland stuff like Belle and Beast stuff, but it's all the same stuff. It's pretty much the 50th anniversary stuff. Lounge flybags, spirit jerseys, hats and ears, and pins. That's pretty much it. So I didn't buy very much at all, just because nothing inspired me and there was no variety in the stuff that was there. So if you're a big Disney merchandise shopper, then you'll probably notice a difference there. Epcot is different because of the construction. Again, that's not a COVID thing, that's a 50th anniversary reconstruction, redevelopment of Epcot thing. It's probably prolonged because of COVID, but you can't blame it on COVID, it would be there anyway. It is a bit of a pain. If you want to get from Mission Space to the land, you either have to basically walk all the way around to the exit and back up, or you have to go the other way. You can't walk through. So it was quite a lot of walking that day. But it will be done soon. I hope. I don't actually know. But yeah, that was a bit of a pain. The Epcot hours are funny now that it opens at 10. That's a bit of an impact because it gives you a shorter day. The only positive is World Showcase also opens at 10 now, so rather than Future World opening at 9 and World Showcase opening at 11, they both open at 10 o'clock, which means you can rope top Frozen, which is what I did, spoiler alert, or Ratatouille if you come in from the International Gateway. But that leads me on to the next thing that I was going to talk about, with the extra morning hours. I can't even remember what they're called. They used to be called extra magic hours, and it used to be one park each day would be open early to resort guests. Now, every park is open every morning half an hour earlier. So it means as a non-resort guest, I can't ever rope drop a park and get to the front of a line to rope drop it, because there'll always be half an hour's worth of people in front of me. So I had to kind of change my strategy for the parks. I knew this, but until I'd actually experienced the first day in each park, I didn't really know whether my strategy was valid or not. Magic Kingdom, it worked really well. Roped up Jungle Cruise and Pirates and Big Thunder Mountain in that order, because Fantasyland and Frontierland and Adventureland aren't open for guests in the early morning hours, so you do actually get to rope drop those. Lightning Lane for Peter Pan, and then you can work your way round, or Lightning Lane Haunted Mansion, because that was exceeding an hour most of the time as well. Epcot, I always used to do Future Worlds first and then go into World Showcase. World Showcase was absolutely packed in the evenings, so I switched my strategy and I did World Showcase first, and then I did Future World in the afternoon. That worked so much better. That's definitely a plan for the future going forwards. Hollywood Studios is a disaster, and whatever you do, you're going to end up with a long wait, so really you just have to pick your poison and go with it. And Animal Kingdom, I got a Lightning Lane for Navi River Journey. I paid for Flight of Passage. and then I rope dropped Dinosaur because nobody else did, so I got a couple of rides on Dinosaur, and then went to the safaris because the safari tends to have a lower weight first thing in the morning. So rather than going to Pandora or Everest to rope drop, I would go to the smaller rides and get your lightning lane set up for the bigger rides for later on. Genie Plus, I'm not going to talk a lot about because I'm going to do a video about Genie Plus, but I need to compose my thoughts about it for a bit longer, and I haven't quite got my head around what I need to say for Genie Plus yet, other than it's not ready for use, it's glitchy, it's temperamental, it's not intuitive. It took me about 3 or 4 days to get the hang of how to use it quickly. I mean, that could just be me being old and not being used to how the app works, but I didn't find it as easy to use as FastPass. Is it good value for money? No, I don't think so. But will I still buy it because it's better than nothing? Yes, probably. It only works when the parks are quieter, and that's all I'll say on that because I'll do another video on that. But it doesn't work when the park's busy because you get maybe 1 or 2 lightning lanes for the day and then they're all sold out. In terms of money and the costs, everything is really expensive. It's not just at Disney. I went to Target the night I arrived to buy all my supplies for the 9 days that I was there, you know, water, Coke, biscuits, crisps, and some of the stuff, food stuff that I wanted to take home, and it cost me $100. That would normally have cost me maybe $60, $70. It was really expensive. A bottle of Coke in the park is now $5. I didn't notice portion sizes being smaller, which people have said they are. They've kept the cost the same or put the costs up and the portions are smaller. I didn't notice that with anything that I ordered, but then I always used to find the portions massive anyway, so I never used to finish anything, so maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the reason why. And in terms of safety and COVID, this doesn't really apply anymore because the day after I flew home they changed the regulations. I felt fine to do with COVID. I felt the safest that I felt anywhere. I feel like the US has a much better handle on it, which my US friends would disagree with, but compared to the UK where we've basically stopped all of our COVID regulations, there are no mask exemptions. If you're in a place where you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask regardless, and people do. And the main difference I found in the US compared to the UK is if you were wearing a mask somewhere that it wasn't required, nobody gave 2 hoots. Nobody gave you a funny look. Nobody was giving kind of like, oh, look at her, she's got a mask on. She doesn't need to wear one, she's got a mask on. Nobody cared, and that was the big difference for me, was that I felt comfortable walking around amongst a group of people that weren't wearing masks whilst I was wearing mine because I didn't feel there was any judgment. So, busier spaces like Hollywood Studios, World Showcase in Epcot, I walked around wearing a mask because I was walking past so many different people, stopping in lines for food and stuff. That was my personal choice and I felt comfortable doing that. I'm not sure I would have felt comfortable going into a lot of the lines once they moved the mask restrictions. I was comfortable with me wearing a mask and everyone else wearing a mask. There was only 3 instances where I felt uncomfortable and was concerned that I might have been near somebody that could have given me COVID. The first 2 were down to the individuals that I was with, not with the location. So the first one was a guy in the outdoor theatre for the flight show, the bird show in Animal Kingdom. It's an outdoor theatre, so you don't have to wear masks. This guy was about 2 metres in the row behind me and just coughed, open mouth coughed with no mask the whole way through the show. I wasn't comfortable with that, but I was just reassuring myself that I had a mask on and I was fine. The second one was in Flight of Passage. Thankfully I hadn't been in the queue with her because I would have left if I had been. But the lady that was put on space number 7 and I was on space number 8 kept pulling her mask down to wipe her snotty nose. She was coughing, her eyes were running. Every time she sneezed, she pulled her mask away from her face because obviously she didn't want her sneeze in her face. She wanted it in everybody else's faces. So when we got into the room, when we get on the bikes, I noticed I had another mask around my wrist because I had the surgical mask and the N95 and I was alternating depending on the situations. I just put both on and double masked. She was the one that concerned me the most, if I'm honest, because she had visible symptoms. And the one thing that was a Disney thing was the theatre for The Lion King. That is not built for people who don't want to be close to each other. The guy who was in front of me coughed the whole way through the show. It was a dry cough, he had no other symptoms, he had a mask on, I had a mask on. He probably just had a cough. but he was, you know, not even an arm's length away from me, so I wasn't really comfortable in that situation, and I made the decision not to go and see that show for a second time, just because I wasn't comfortable with the proximity to other people. With other shows like the Carousel of Progress, the Muppets, the American Adventure, any of the movie 3D 360 movies in Epcot, I just hung back. I let everybody else go into the theatre first, and then I went and sat or stood in an area that didn't have anyone within 2 metres of me. Unless, of course, days like when Hollywood Studios was really busy and there wasn't the space to do that because the theatre was so full, I would then just sit in a quieter area as possible as I could. But the American Adventure, for example, nobody was sat in like the first 10 rows, so I went and sat in like row 5 seats in, and there was nobody around me. But that's obviously just my personal choice. I think everything was relatively clean. Yes, there was a couple of dirty toilets. I hardly saw any custodial staff walking around, but I think that's a hiring thing. They need to hire them all back again, and I'm not making excuses for Disney here at all, because I do believe as a former cast member that there is a standard that Disney needs to hit, and there were some instances where they didn't on this trip, but I'd also like to think that that's not a permanent thing. So that will be something for me to judge on future trips. There was lots of leaves, fallen leaves and stuff, which they would normally sweep up every morning before the park opened, which I don't think they do anymore. But there was nothing that was really disgusting, really dirty, no massive piles of litter or anything like that. So generally, it was actually more normal than I was expecting it to be. I ran myself ragged, but I think as a whole, for me personally, there wasn't that much difference. There was the odd thing. I had a few things go wrong. I had glitches with the app. I had a couple of meltdowns. But actually, I'd have that any other trip anyway. The only thing I would say is that's, from my perspective, from someone who used to go maybe once or twice a year, if you're planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip and it's the only time you're ever going to go, don't go for another couple of years. Because it is not the most magical place on earth at the moment. It's a fantastic holiday, and if you like going to the Disney parks and you know the parks and you love the parks and you're happy to accept some changes, you'll have a great time. If it's your one and only trip, don't do it now. That's basically what I would say, because it is different, and if you are going, you need to accept that there will be differences. And if it's your only trip, I wouldn't want somebody to make those compromises, whereas for me, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I'll still go and I'll still enjoy myself. So yeah, I've probably talked for hours and hours and hours, but hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an idea about how my experience was. Overall, it was a fantastic trip. I don't regret it for a minute. It was more expensive than I would normally pay. I don't regret that. If somebody had a time machine and said you can go back and go do that trip all over again, I would, and I would probably do it in exactly the same way as well, because it was a brilliant trip. And now I've got it out of my system, hopefully I'll have a bit more of a relaxed trip when I go in September. So hopefully that's reassured some of you, or it's given you a bit of confidence. If you have any questions, then obviously let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you soon.